Ye asked and ye shall receive. Today we're going to have a chat about the weight loss injections, which I'm sure at this point you have all heard in some shape or form, either from the internet, your mom, or from your co-workers, who have either decreed it as the best thing since sliced bread and the only thing that will ever help people lose weight, or absolute devil's tool that is an excuse for lazy people to never move more and eat less. So, which one is it? Is it going to kill everyone? And is it going to put me out of business? Let's find out. So what are those injections? Well, in short, they are called GLP-1, which is glucagon-like peptide 1. They are agonists of a naturally released incretin hormone that gets released into your gut when you finished eating. They were developed originally as a solution for diabetes, and it works really, really well for that, because what it does is it controls when does pancreas release insulin into your bloodstream, and it only does so when the blood sugar is very, very high, while simultaneously suppressing the release of glucagon, which is a hormone that stimulates the release of blood sugar out of your liver. So, long story short, it keeps the blood sugar very, very low, which is the exact thing that people with diabetes need. While they were developing this medication, they also realized that it has some very interesting effect on the nervous system, where it suppresses the hunger noise that people who have problems with eating experience quite often and basically makes them think about food less. It also slows down gastric emptying, which in short, it's the transit time that it takes for the stuff you eat to go through you, which makes you feel fuller for longer. So a combination of all of those effects basically made them think, hey, this would be a really cool thing for weight loss. And here we are. So we are currently on what's considered the third generation of those peptides. The second one, which you probably had the most of, Ozempic, they're called broadly semaglutides. They had one mechanism of action. Then we are now on tirzepatides, which is stuff like Mounjaro, which works on the GLP-1 agonist, and then on another incretin hormone. It has a dual action, and there's currently another one being developed and researched called retatrutide, I think, which works on 3 different hormones and mechanisms of actions, and they're all basically more efficient than the other, and they allow for less frequent injections, and so on and so on. That's the gist of it. There are also some other very interesting health benefits of taking them, especially for people who already have, metabolic damage due to being obese for a very long time or issues with diabetes. They have some cardiovascular protective effects and offer some protection against neurodegeneration, which again, it's something that can happen with diabetes. It has some pretty good effects on blood pressure. It's also being investigated as a potential treatment for PCOS and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So they are very, very interesting, and they seem to be doing a lot more than people originally thought they will be doing. They're also being looked into as a potential help for people with different addictions, because the same effect that makes people think about food less also seems to work in regards to, let's say, smoking and alcohol, which, again, if this is something that we can capitalize on, that could potentially change a lot of people's lives. But I'll get to that a little bit later. So, how effective actually are they? Are they dangerous to take? Well, let's start with the dangers first. Not really, although they do come with side effects. And gastrointestinal discomfort, it's something that most people I have talked to who have used them have experienced. Feeling very bloated and gassy and constipated and so on and so on. A lot of those side effects can be mitigated by simply doing some nutritional interventions. And that's, again, something we will go to a little bit later. There are some suspicions of a more serious side effects, like problems with gallbladder, for example, but those are actually reported quite minor. It doesn't seem to be like a massive prevalence of those side effects. Overall, they seem to be quite safe to use. So, the efficiency. They do work, long story short. People who are doing semaglutide, according to some meta-analysis, they have lost up to 15% of the body weight in, let's say, 72 weeks of using it. Let me have a look if I quoted that correctly. 68 weeks to lose 15 to 17%. And then Mounjaro allowed them to lose, within 72 weeks, between 20 to 22.5% of the starting body weight. That's insanely high. You might think to yourself, oh, but that's like a year and a half, Marcin. We've seen people over here who have lost, 20 kilos in the space of a month or 2 months or 3 months. Yes, But that's just one mechanism of actions. And that's an average across all people who have used it, who have been studied. And also, and this is what's very, very important, who this medication is actually for. It's not for everyone. This is, in my personal opinion, for people who genuinely are obese. And you might think of yourself like, well, Marcin, according to BMI, I am obese. I mean, yeah, sure, you might be, and you might be somebody who potentially could look into this. But I have in the past worked with people whose only way to move would be to sit down on a box, the one that I've got my camera propped up on right now, and do arm circles, because the bodies were so large that they genuinely could not do anything else. So imagine somebody who's a foot shorter than me and weighs 100 pounds more than me. That's what I'm talking about. Those people are at the risk of literally dying at any given point. So giving them something that can help them lose 20% of the body weight, which can drop them, down by 30 kilos and literally make them then be able to do other interventions or maybe get some more medical help. That is absolutely beneficial and worth looking into. Who those medications are not for are people who think that they are just going to burn some fat before summer. We have seen a lot of it when they originally hit the market. Me and a couple of my colleagues have absolutely predicted that this is going to happen. All the Love Island types got themselves on Ozempic. They've watched Sharon Osbourne turn herself into a skeleton, and they went like, yeah, I'm gonna get shredded for the summer. And then within 3 months, they were all complaining about losing all of the muscle because they couldn't eat. So, while we're at it, what are the downsides of taking them and how effective are they in the long term? So according to the same data that told us how much weight people have lost over a certain period of time, we also know whether or not those people have regained their weight. And it seems like about 75% of the originally lost weight came back within about a year of cessation of taking those injections. And a very significant number of people went back up to the weight they started at within 2 years of stopping the injections. Yeah. So now you might think to yourself, well, that doesn't sound like it's worth it. Here's the crux of all of it. They are not a miracle drug. They simply make you eat less. In a context, they work very, very similarly to any other diet anybody has ever done. If you compare that to a rapid fat loss protocol that we're doing in a gym, for example, we had people who have lost significant amount of weight and they've managed to keep it on because they maintained what they have learned. They've implemented the new habits. They've implemented the new patterns. They've, swapped out what they keep at home, when they shop, when they exercise, and so on and so on and so on. And even though they had some initial weight regain, which is to be expected, they've, by large, managed to keep all of the results that they have achieved. And then there are people who didn't, because they finished whatever they were doing and then went back directly into doing what they did before, whether there were the injections or whether there were any other dietary interventions. So yeah, they do work if you do everything else around it. So a lot of the side effects I talked about earlier, they are caused by people simply not implementing the lifestyle changes that are required to actually lose weight. So the muscle wastage, for example, it can be mitigated by simply eating protein, which is something that you guys who have worked with me have told me bang on about over and over and over again. The constipation that a lot of people experience with it can be solved by increasing the fiber intake, which, again, if you've done any form of a fat loss with me, I've been telling you about increasing your fiber intake. So we have a lot of people who go into online websites for online prescriptions, or they now, supermarkets are offering monthly subscriptions for, GLP-1 injections, and they think that they'll take it and they'll lose weight, and they are losing weight, and then it will magically stay off. And it simply won't. So unless you are prepared to do everything else while the injection is helping you not listen to the noise in your head telling you to compulsively eat, if you are going to use that 6 months or a year of you being on it, because like I said to you earlier, it takes 68 weeks, 72 weeks to lose a significant amount of weight on it, that is a long time to develop new habits. That is a lot of time to learn how to cook new food, to change your shopping habits, to change your lifestyle in general and start moving. And a lot of people who go in those injections are simply not doing that. And that's basically when the problem arises, because we are advertising them to people. They are getting easier and easier to get, but we are not offering people any support to actually make them efficient. That is my only concern with them making rolled out as a cure for obesity, because while the production of those peptides is relatively cheap, at the end of the day, the brands will charge somewhere between 130 to 220 pounds a month for a dosage of injections. There are also issues with them not actually being used properly, and that comes from both sides, because we have people who will stop using them too quickly and then just simply never got the effect of it because they got some temporary weight loss and then they went like, oh, I'm not losing, more weight fast enough, therefore it stopped working. And then we also have practitioners who are prescribing them and they're increasing the dosages way too quickly. And there is with any drug a law of diminishing results where you keep increasing the dose and the effects you are getting from the drug will simply get lesser and lesser and your body will become more and more adapted and resistant to that particular drug. So if you are considering taking those drugs, you can't do this right. And we have had people in this gym who have used them and they succeeded at it and they've managed to come off and they've managed to keep off the weight that they have lost. And even though they tell me it's like, yeah, I can, I think about food more now than I did when I was on my injections, but I have learned about my food and the right habits and it's becoming easier and easier for me to maintain it. And that's great. And I have also heard of people personally and from my colleagues who, were not willing to do any of the work and kept eating pretty much the same way as they were eating before they went on. And they just went, well, it doesn't work for me. It's complete nonsense. So if you decide to take them, make sure you eat small and frequent meals because you do not want to become malnourished. Some people literally just stop eating on it, and that's not something you want to do. Make sure you're consuming frequently some serving of protein because you will have muscle wastage if you just stop eating altogether. Stay hydrated because people stop drinking. They also don't intake any fiber when they eat and they get constipated and they get very, very unwell and so on and so on. And, lastly, think about it in the same context as antidepressants. It's obviously a completely different category of drugs. But when you have somebody who really struggles with mental health and they are just having a very hard time engaging with any sort of a help, you put them on antidepressants with a hope that it will, quiet the issues down enough that they can seek help or they can live life in some capacity. That's how I see those drugs. If I have somebody who's so far gone into whatever, health issue they're into, and this drug can help them drug out of it so they can start implementing other stuff that's not going to cost them hundreds of pounds a month, then I am absolutely on board. Wow. I went off on one, huh? Let's see. Is there anything else that I can tell you? Oh, this is one. This is actually very, very important. There has been a lot of stigma surrounding those drugs. And I have heard from a lot of people that they will never admit to anybody at work or to anybody in the family that they are taking them, which I think it's absolutely ridiculous that this is how people just are. Unfortunately, I cannot just press a button and change people's mindset about it. The best advice I can give you is to think about it this way. The people who are telling you that you are somehow cheating or, somehow morally failing because you have resorted to using drugs to help you achieve the health that you deserve, they are the same people who would gladly tell a depressed person to just toughen it out and stop being a pussy. Those are the exact same people. The same folk who would tell you, oh, you just need to eat less and move more. Now they can't tell you that because you're on injections that basically make you lose weight regardless of, well, not regardless how much you eat because you will eat less, but regardless of how much you move. You're basically taking the power away from them and they hate it. This isn't on you. This is absolutely on them. If you want to do those drugs, if you're willing to look into this properly, if you're willing to prepare yourself, if you're willing to really put in the work and you have the money to spend on it, then go for it. If you think after watching this video that you're the type of a person who could do this, then I will be absolutely happy to support you with it because I think that they are, honestly, the best thing we have had for weight management ever. And I say that as somebody who gets paid a lot of money to help people lose weight. I am not threatened by those injections because at the end of the day, it's not just, I can't just give somebody an 800 calorie, calorie target and just leave them to it and hope that they're going to be happy and do very well with it. The same way, giving somebody 12 months of Mounjaro injections and just hoping that they're going to stop getting obese afterwards, it's also simply not going to happen. So if you have any more questions about it, feel free to come and talk to me about it. It is a fascinating subject. I am really curious to see how those drugs will develop further. The new generations of them are showing some very promising effects. Personally, I don't think I'll ever have a reason to use them, but there seems to be more and more very, health positive effects that they seem to be having. And if we can, for example, develop them in a way that they can help people get through addictions, which people I work with who are like very obese, usually it's not the only problem they're dealing with. There is quite often issues with smoking and excessive drinking and so on. If we can also fight against that at the same time, then we're killing multiple birds and multiple problems with one stone. I personally cannot see anything wrong with it. That's kind of my 5, 10, 15 cents and nearly 20 minutes of a video. So I'm gonna stop now. And hopefully this was useful for you guys.